everybody, welcome to Milwaukee Music Lessons. My name is Alex Bennett, and in this episode, we are going to be covering chords. In the previous video, we talked about the major scale, and then before that, we've talked about intervals as well as the chromatic scale. So we've kind of been working our way through the basics of like how harmony works in general, how it all starts to function. And so today we're going to be working on chords for a little bit, talking about what makes a chord and what should you be looking for, how do you want to build one, what are the things that you want to pay attention to. And so yeah, let's just jump right into it here. The first thing that we're going to cover is when we talk about what do you normally see inside of your basic chords. We refer to the three notes that we commonly see as the root, the third, and the fifth. The root, third, and fifth are essentially what's going to make up the three primary chords that you are likely to see, or that make up kind of your average scale, your average major and minor scale. So let's talk about first, why do we call them a root, third, and fifth? Usually, if you remember from the intervals section there, right, we had different kinds of like seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, and those often required that we skipped over the top of notes in order to be able to play them. The root of our chord here is where we start with. That's what the chords, what we usually start naming it after. And then the third implies that we're going to be skipping over a letter to the third letter after the root. And then finally, the fifth is the same idea. We're going to be skipping over the second, third, and fourth letter into the fifth of that chord, the fifth note that comes after it, right? That doesn't necessarily tell us anything about how far we're going to have to go, and that's what we're going to discuss next, are the intervals that we need in order to be able to make the basic chords, right? So let's talk about the major chord first. So the major chord, if I start with a root chord of C, and I want to be able to make a major chord, we have to understand the distance between the root and the third. The distance between the root and the third should be a major third, or a two whole steps is what we would cover between that. So two whole steps, that takes us from C, C sharp, D is a whole step, D, D sharp, E is another whole step. So that is two whole steps between our root and our third. And then from the third to the fifth should be a step and a half, or a minor third. So if I continue on from where I left off, which was E, and I go from E to F is a half step, F sharp is a whole step, and now finally to this G gives us a step and a half. Root, third, fifth. We went root to third being two whole steps, and third to fifth, a step and a half. The total distance from our root to our fifth is 3.5 steps, or if you remember from the intervals section, a perfect fifth. So we have root, major third, perfect fifth, or root, two whole steps, step and a half, for a total of 3.5. And that is a guideline for all major chords, right? Just like we talked about when we were doing the major scale. A major scale is defined by the pattern of whole steps and half steps that we laid out beforehand. This major chord, all major chords have this exact pattern built into it without exception, okay? If you change any aspect of it, it's no longer a major chord, it's something else. So what would happen if we wanted to make a minor chord? Minor chords still have the same layout of a root, third, and fifth, but the interval between those root, thirds, and fifths changes a little bit. So instead of two whole steps from the root to the third, instead this time we have a step and a half, or a minor third, from root to third. So if I go C to C sharp to D, that's a whole step, and now finally to E flat here, that's a step and a half. That is the root and third of a C minor chord. If I want to continue on to the fifth, now it's two whole steps to get to the fifth. So I go from E flat to E to F sharp to G. That gives us our two whole steps, and that makes our C minor chord. So instead of what we had before, now we have C, E flat, G. So basically our distances between like root third and third fifth kind of swapped. In the major one, we did 2 whole steps to a step and a half for a total of 3.5 steps. This time we did 1.5 to 2 whole steps for a total of 3.5. So our distance from root to fifth hasn't changed, but our root to third has changed. We've gone from C major to C minor. And once again, that's all minor chords are built that way. Root to third to fifth, step and a half, 2 steps with a total of 3 in between. So minor third, perfect fifth. Okay, now there's a third type of chord that you may or may not have heard of. This chord is much less common, especially if you're simply used to like rock or pop music, and that is the diminished chord. The diminished chord is a step and a half from root to third, but it is only a step and a half from third to fifth. And that step and a half, that lowering of value is what creates a diminished chord, right? Back in our intervals section, I mentioned that there were different types of fifths. There was a perfect fifth, and there was also a diminished fifth. And in this case, that's what you get. You get a minor third to a diminished fifth. Sorry, I just started getting hiccups in the middle of this lesson here. So minor third, diminished fifth, or step and a half, and that's your diminished chord. So let's recap real fast. Major chord, we have 2 from root to third and 1.5 from third to fifth. Major third, perfect fifth, that gives us our C major chord. Root to third in a minor chord is a step and a half or a minor third, and then 2 whole steps to G, giving us our perfect fifth again. That's our C minor. Or if I do the C to E flat to this time G flat, that's our diminished chord. 1.5, 1.5. For a total of only 3 from our root to fifth. So yeah, those are the 3 basic chords that you're going to need to know. Are there plenty of other chords that exist out there? Absolutely. We are broad stroking it a little bit right now, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to focus on the chords that you primarily see within the context of a major scale. There is a whole lot more to chords than just these 3, and I'm more than happy to go over those, maybe at a different date, at a different time. But for now, this is what we're going to cover. And in the next video, we're going to take a look at our major scale that we did from the last video and combine them together with the major, minor, and diminished chord that we did here and look at how do those things all intermingle, how do they mesh together in some capacity. So stick around to find out. That video should be coming out shortly after this. In the meantime, my name has been Alex Bennett. It still is Alex Bennett, really, at the end of this video. And before I forget, too, because I always forget, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, please feel free to drop me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will hopefully see you guys in the next video.